Hey guys, how's it going? So recently it was brought to my attention that there was a video subject that nobody has touched here on YouTube so far, and that is how to remove and replace the uh, alternator pulley on one of these Mopar alternators. Seen a bunch of these things. These things were used from about 1960 or so on up to into the 80s on various different kinds of Mopars. They weren't used on every Mopar. If it was a heavy duty or a police version or something along those lines, then they oftentimes would have a different kind of alternator. But this is only going to concern these Mopar, these Chrysler, what they call the Chrysler-built alternators, whether it be a round back or a square back like this car has on. Now this car is a 68, and it really should have. Originally, it had what they call a round back alternator. It's the style of the rear of the alternator is the difference among some other things. The internals are different, but it has. This is sort of a conversion alternator, but the theory is going to be the same on this. So when people look at these alternators, they kind of freak out because there's no bolt in there and there's no nut. If you work on a Chevy or a Ford, you usually have a pulley that's held on with a nut. These don't have it. They're an interference fit. So to get this off takes a little, like a puller kit for it, but it's not hard. What's putting it back on is the harder part. So anyway, come on in, and we're not gonna work on this one. This one's fine. I don't have to touch this. But I have a parts alternator that we're going to use for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to show you how to get that pulley off and then put it back on again. Okay, then here we are. We're in the action center. I'll get you scooted back just a little bit so you can get a panorama of what's going on. So you know that video you've been looking for about how to remove one of these pulleys? Well, you found it. This is it. You're here. Final destination. So now I've got my parts alternator put up in my big Wilton vise there, and you can do that if it's a good alternator you're working on. You can do that at your own risk. I wouldn't put much pressure on them because they're aluminum. They're old aluminum, and for me it just makes it easier to demonstrate this. But you can do this operation with it, just lay it on the bench, as long as you don't run it off the side and let it fall on the floor. In that case, you go buy another alternator. So anyway, I'll start out with, I was asked about this procedure, and remembered I was trying to tell the person who asked me about it what to use. So first thing we need to do is we need to look at the kit that I use on this. I've had this thing forever, and I don't use it very often. I have to look at the instructions every time to remember how to use it. But this is item number 40749, which is U.S. General, which is laughable because right here is made in China. You know where this came from. That's correct, Harbor Freight. Nice and cheap. But you know what? It's worked good for many, many years. The worst things happened is my latch is torn up on it. So, if you're looking for a kit, you can buy this one or you can buy some other kit, whatever you prefer. But the crucial part of this is that the kit has to have this kind of an apparatus in it. This is this split little shell. That's what I call it. I don't know what technically it would be called. Jaws, I guess. But you have to have that because they have to go around this pulley here. And then this thing fits over it. And then that's how you pull it. So it's critical. You can forget trying to use one of those little 3-jaw pullers or something like that on this. It ain't gonna happen. You can also forget doing like Papa did and get a couple big old screwdrivers behind it or wave that thing off there. That ain't happening either, because as you'll see coming up, it takes a press to put this pulley back on. You know, they run 150,000 miles up flying off, and Granddad ain't gonna get one off with some screwdrivers. You can forget that. So anyway, so this is a parts alternator. It's probably usable, but it's a low amp unit. It's a 30 amp. So I don't have anything I'd want to use it on right now. But a lot of people have, sorry, I'm dealing with my allergies again. A lot of people end up with an alternator that has a wrong pulley on it. They have a double groove pulley and they need a single, or they have a single and they need a double. So you'll see coming up how you have to do all this, but it's not the easiest thing to do. It's a lot more involved than just taking the nut off and pulling it. So, okay, like I said, forgive me, but I have to read these instructions, but I think I remember now how all this goes on. So, you have some operation. This thing's called a jack screw. It's in the kit. You have to lubricate it. You have a nut that goes in here. And so, what you're doing is, your theory is that you put this thing in, and it fits down in the center, and then you have these two jaws here, and they go on everything. They go around everything. So, you kind of have to position things correctly. So what you're doing is basically just going to run that nut down all the way, like so. And it's not threading into anything. There's nothing in there to thread into, so I don't think it's got to do that. You just have to don't thread it down. So keep doing it so it's pushing this thing out. This thing has to be, the end of this needs to be touching the end of the armature shaft in there, and this thing has to be, this big nut has to be lightly seated against that. That's it. That's all you do. Don't do anything more than that. And then you put these jaws around it, like so. Like you put them around everything. You put them around the flange of the nut and the pulley flange. And you put this ring around it to hold everything together. And now you see why I put it in a vise. And the two tools that you're going to need to do this are, you need a 13/16 wrench that goes on this to hold it in place. And then you're going to use a 1/2-inch wrench to turn the jack screw. So what I do first is, can you see? It ain't that easy to do all this. I'm trying to get the camera in. It's okay though. Okay, so we're going to hold that large nut there. Hold that nut. And then we're simply going to, let's put it down like that. There you go. And so we're going to turn this. This is called the jack screw. We're going to start turning this thing in so that it starts tightening up a little bit. So it starts to pull on this pulley. See how that's working? Pushes that, the nut comes out and pulls the pulley off. Now, that looks like a great place to smash my hand if that thing slips. So I'm going to maybe do something a little different. Matter of fact, I'm going to do something else different. I'm not going to use this wrench. I don't have enough leverage. Hang on. Hang on, I say. Okay. I've switched over now to a large ratchet. I'll get it. Hang on. There we go. All right. Are you sure you know what you're doing? No, not really. Watch that gap right there. I had to look at my camera and make sure it's still recording. Boy, if this thing hadn't been recording, there would have been a fatality involving a camera shortly, but it is. Okay, so what do you do if it starts bottoming like that? Going that way. Do that. This happened before. I was trying to remember what I did here. I don't think that helped what I just did. Come on now, Harbor. Don't fail me now. I see what's going on. Run that back down there. Just a minor adjustment. That's all we needed. Yeah, right, hopefully. Are you sure you know what you're doing? I already told you I don't. Are you listening to me? Okay. That does not help. So you do that. I'm trying to think here. Why was that doing that? Oh, hold on. I remember how I dealt with that. Hang on. Be right back. Okay, yeah, I remembered I had to stuff something down in here because this jack screw is not long enough. Thanks, Harbor Freight, U.S. General. I think that's what I did here. Again, this is at your own risk. Boy, thank goodness you found this video. You imagine how frustrated you'd be if you're trying to do this and I hadn't shown you this. You would have had to give up and go to AutoZone and get a Chinese rebuilt alternator. Okay, let's see if I'm smart as I think I am here. Yep. Well, those knuckles want it. You know they do. What's Musty One say? Ha! Ha ha! There you go. So a little trick worked. Okay, there we go. That's how you get the thing off there. Nobody's favorite pawpaws involved. So anyway, just grab yourself the kit. Those things, 15 years ago, I know that kit wasn't much then, and it's probably not much more now, but it will work to do that. But the bad news is, to get this pulley back on, you can't just beat it on with a hammer like you do up in the backwoods. You're going to have to put it in a press. So that means that thing has to come apart, split. So anyway, let me get this stuff all cleaned up. I'll get this thing back down here. We'll split it apart and we'll put the pulley back on, and then you'll know how to do it, and everybody should be happy. All right, see you there. Okay, so I was putting this kit back up, and you remember when I said that I didn't use this kit very often? Well, I've forgotten how to use it. Okay, this deal with that is probably not going to be necessary because this is the button that goes in there. It's got like a little O-ring on it for some reason. I guess just to hold it in. It goes into the end of this jack screw, they call it. The nut is not on there normally. This was taking it all apart, but that's what I was cranking down on. Well, once I removed this and got looking over here, They have longer things here, so you can insert this and that should take care of your problem. So you don't have to use a socket. You can use a socket if you want to, if it makes you more comfortable, but try this thing first that I didn't notice in the kit till just now. Because I knew I had to put this part back in here because I knew somebody's going to say, dude, there's an extender right there. You didn't see him. See there? At such and such part of the video. Thanks anyway. All right, let's go ahead and get to the next part of this and rip this thing apart and put the pulley back on. So we got that pulley removed. Wasn't any real big deal. So if you're just changing pulleys, or even if you have to go into one of these things to repair it, the alternator has to be split apart to change the pulley. And I'll tell you why in just a minute, but it's not hard to get one of these apart. The first thing you'll need to do, this one's already kind of been apart because it's a parts unit, but the first thing you'll need to do is you'll need to get the brushes out of it. So if you look in the back, it's got 2 brush holders. The older version, this older round back, usually only has 1 fill wire going to it, so it'll have a brush here. And then this one should be just grounded to the case. It should not have a wire going to it. If you're working on a later square back alternator, they normally always have dual filled wires, so each will have a plastic, that can plug in, like a spade connector on it. So you just get those out and just pull them out. They come out easily. And then you've got 3 bolts that go through from the front to the rear. The case halves, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. So they're all the same. Just be kind of careful with this because if the thing's never been apart, sometimes they're a little bit hard to break loose, and they're not real heavy duty, so just take care of that. Once you have that, the bolts out of it ready to go, you just simply can usually just pull it out. One half off the other. It might take a little bit of finagling. And there it comes. So this is the rear half. You don't have to mess with that anymore. If you're repairing it, you already know why you're in there, so you can deal with that. But we're chiefly concerned with putting the pulley back on it. And so this has to come apart like this to put the pulley on it because you have to press this pulley back on. Do not sit here with a hammer and hammer this thing back together because you got a bearing up here and plus you got a surface back here that the bearing rides on, and you're going to screw something up. I know I sound like your wife or something saying that, but don't do it. Nowhere in the factory service manual does it ever tell anybody to bang the pulley back on. Because I've seen these things with a bent shaft. I know that's what it's from because the pulley that I removed off of it was bent. So you're playing with fire if you do that. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to find a press. I happen to have one here, handy. But they're not hard to find. You can find a machine shop that'll do it for you pretty easily, I would think. So we're going to get this thing set up and get this in the press, and I'll show you what you have to do to press the pulley back on. Okay, so I got this thing in position, and what I've done here is I've simply lined up my blocks. They have a name for them, I'm sure. I don't remember what it is. And I have it set so that I can put the cooling fan fins on this. Now, technically, to do this, what the book tells you is that you're not supposed to do this, so you do this at your own risk. I've never had a problem doing this before. These things are pretty tough because you got a bunch of them around here that support this thing. But technically, the book says to support this end here in something when you press on it, and if you want to be safer than sorry, I will do that, but we're going to do it this way. And so, kind of got this thing. What you have to do is if you look in here, this is the shaft, and then there's a bearing in here, but there's a shoulder down here that is part of the bearing, and this pulley, this part right here that goes down in there, very technical I know, but you just simply press this thing on until it bottoms out, and I'm not talking put 30 tons of pressure on it. Just you'll know when it's down in there, and that's all you do. So I'm just kind of lining it up, and I tell you now, this is a slow press. So I may, because it's hand operated, I may speed a little bit of this up. so nobody gets bored. Okay, so you'll feel when it gets down there pretty tight, and that's where you stop at. And you can see why you ain't gonna bang that thing on with a hammer. You'll wreck it. You can try it, but you'll wreck it. So, okay. Let's go a little bit further. I think that's gonna come out. I don't use this press very much, but man, it's indispensable when you need one. Okay. Now this thing has a bad front bearing in it, so it sounds pretty bad, but that's all there is to it. That's how you put it back on there. So then you're going to just reassemble the alternator. You're going to put the back half back on it. You know, you'll know how to put it on because it only looks correct one way. So, and then put your brushes and brush holders and all that back on, put it back on the car, you're ready to ride, man. So there you go. I hope this was informative. Hadn't seen this video done on YouTube. As I said, I thought Uncle Tony and them had been all over this, but maybe VGG or Junkyard Digs or Dylan or, well, wait a minute. They just go buy one. They don't fix them. Let's all laugh together. Anyway, just kidding around, guys. Thank you so much. We'll see you on the next one, and have a good one.